Welcome back to Open Line, talking about, well, should inmates get reduced sentences if they get sterilized? That was what was offered in one county. The judge quickly took that back, but two lawmakers here, Representative Brenda Gilmore, Senator Jeff Yarbro, have a bill in the legislature that would make that illegal. They would just put it into law. You can't do that. Now we're streaming this on Facebook, also taking your calls. On Facebook, several comments. Sarah Green Smith says most of the inmates were multiple offenders. She said, in deadbeat parents by sterilization. It's a choice. They aren't forced to undergo this. What do you think there?
Well, again, most of the ones that were there because of drug addiction, and I certainly understand some members in the community not wanting the children to either come out being themselves addicted to drugs or being wards of the state. But I still would submit that the majority of these people are there because they need help. They should not have been in prison. They should have gotten the resources. As a community, we should provide the resources that they need to get well again. And the two is, there shouldn't be a crime for being poor. We shouldn't penalize people for being poor.
And I think it's not quite accurate to characterize what this judge was offering as a choice. This wasn't offered on their last day of their sentence. I mean, sure, they weren't forced, as in they weren't held down and forced to undergo surgery, but they were. I mean, they were forced to choose between undergoing this sterilization or staying in jail longer. And that is not the type of choice that any sane or moral government should ever pose to its citizens. KK says, some people want help but can't get it. I called an entire weekend trying to get a friend in a facility, was told to call back Tuesday after the holiday, 3 days later. So she's saying she's trying to get people in, but there's no place to get people.
Well, right. I'm not sure sterilization is a good trade-off, though. And the other thing is they were only getting 30 days shaved off their time. That's an awful high price to pay, sterilization, for just being able to get out of jail or prison for 30 days earlier.
Well, so, I mean, what I think that the question gets at is how hard it is for people in this state to get treatment for addiction, and the biggest addiction that's ravaging the state is opioids, which hasn't been the consequence of illegal drug dealers. It has happened because of laws that we passed in the legislature, laws that passed at the federal level, and legal practices of patients, doctors, and pharmaceutical companies. And right now in Tennessee, I mean, I think the CDC statistics on this are almost beyond belief. 1 out of 6 people in Tennessee, over 1 million people, has misused, abused, or been in treatment for opioids in the last year. We have over 300,000 people that are deeply, in a troubling, disorder level relationship with opioids. And I mean, the governor has recognized that this is the biggest priority the state's facing, but we're putting a minuscule amount of money relative to our budget into treatment, which is going to help a tiny fraction of people. And there are a lot of people that want to get their lives back together, but these drugs are powerful because they were designed to be so. And I am all for cutting it off. I'm all for people taking responsibility, but if we're not giving people the tools and the access to treatment, unfortunately, that story of calling around and not being able to find any place to go is all too common. And if you're somebody who can't afford it, you don't even have anybody to call around to.
Absolutely. We hear that on this show over and over when we talk about this topic, that there are people that want treatment, but they can't find a facility to actually get the treatment. And so that's a huge issue. And we can talk about that some more. One more thing on this. Another commenter here on Facebook, and I'll just let you all talk about this. So obviously on Facebook, there's a little more support for this than there was with the calls, but it's a choice for inmates. Multiple inmates are multiple offenders, not caring for their children. It offers them a chance to end that cycle. So I'll let you comment on that, then we'll talk about some other bills.
Well, again, I'll just restate what I said earlier. giving up your ability to have children later in life just to shave off 30 days, I don't feel like is an even exchange. And those individuals who feel that way, I would just say, I wonder how they would feel if it was their daughters and their sons that were in prison and jail. I think they would feel lots different. We have more and more young people, because they are caught up in the opioid crises, that are going to prison because they find themselves committing crimes to support their habits. And so that means that these young people would be making a decision that's going to impact their lives years in the future down the line. So this is not the right policy.
Well, and I think that Representative Gilmore hit that right on the head. I think there are very few of the people who, even if you're commenting on Facebook, would make the choice themselves to not have grandchildren because their child made this decision while incarcerated.
So what do we do? We'll broaden the discussion. There is no doubt there is a huge opioid problem in our state, across the country. But in our state, you go from rural county to rural county, it's shocking. It's worse than I had understood for a long time. You spend any amount of time in some of these more rural counties and it's shocking. So what do we do? We're a state that doesn't have an income tax. We don't have tons of money. We can't just build. What do we do?
And we didn't expand Medicaid, which of course, had we done that, we would have enough money to treat almost any illness in this state. But we're going to have to keep creating an awareness that this is not the right policy to address these issues. And we have to take responsibility as a state that we've got to speak for those who are least among us, or who don't have the voice to speak for themselves, and to prey on people who are sick or people who are poor, and to offer them this alternative is not a good alternative.
So, I mean, the first thing that Representative Gilmore mentioned was Medicaid expansion, which Governor Haslam introduced in our state. Just a few miles north of here in Kentucky, they saw about a 740% increase in treatment for opiates after they expanded Medicaid. There is no question but that thousands and thousands of people who are struggling every day to get by would have access to treatment, and it would not cost the taxpayers of Tennessee one additional cent. We're just choosing not to do it because we're still fighting old political fights that are now 3 years gone. I mean, like we've had a new Congress, a new White House. They haven't changed this Medicaid policy, but we in Tennessee have the Republican supermajority has opted for us not to go down that path, and it has consequences.
What responsibility do the drug companies play? And what in the legislature, what can be done, I guess, to go after the drug companies? Because when you read they sent millions of pills to towns that had a couple thousand people, it blows my mind. And they've been raking in profits for so long. I get a little frustrated with that. What responsibility do they have, and what can the legislature do about drug companies?
No, I mean, I think that reaction is the human one. Somebody has gotten really rich off our communities having higher death rates, and there unquestionably needs to be investigation, and to the extent that people knew what was going on and put profits ahead of humans here, they need to be held responsible. We've got DAs across the state. We've got local governments that are in litigation. I would hope that the Attorney General of the state would very much consider being part of that. It's really been absent in the conversation thus far this year in relationship to the governor's plan, but I think it's a really important question that needs to be asked.
And I wanted to add too, when you talk about some of these rural counties, 10 hospitals have already been closed, and they were all in rural counties, simply because we were not able to expand Medicaid. And had we been able to do that, then probably those hospitals would not have closed, and they would have been able to help individuals in those small counties and small cities who needed help with their drug addictions.
Do these pharmaceutical drug companies have so much money that they have isolated themselves from some of the responsibility that might go along with this crisis? I mean, do you think that they can be regulated by lawmakers, you know, in Congress, in the state, everywhere, because they have so much money?
I think that they're probably no different than corporate America, that they're making a lot of money again at the peril of people who are sick and poor people, and they make huge contributions to us as elected officials, and so therefore some of us maybe turn a blind eye to that and let them continue to rake in profits on the back of poor people.
And I mean, this isn't every single pharmaceutical company. I mean, we know where this came from, and I think that we can look every day in every community and see the costs that are being borne. We had over 20,000 overdoses in Tennessee last year. We had 20,000 overdoses the year before that. I think we know that the cost that's being borne, and I think that we know that we have. I think that regardless of whether you've taken a campaign contribution, when you see people in your community dying, this legislature ought to be able to act on that.
All right, we're going to take a break. Continue this discussion. If you want to call in, there's the number 615-737-PLUS, 615-737-7587. Take your call. Also, your comments on Facebook. Just put a comment down in the comment section, and I will read some of them. We'll come back and talk about student loans and taking away licenses and that kind of thing. Take a break. Be back right after this.